The farmer saves 3 Apache children. The Arizona sun scorched the cracked earth as Eliza Whitmore collapsed against the trading post wall, her throat raw with thirst. 3 days of walking through the desert had reduced her wedding ring, her last possession, to a glinting lie in her palm. The trader behind the counter barely glanced up from his ledger. "Water and bread," she whispered, extending the gold band. "Please." Before I continue, I'd love to ask you to take a moment to subscribe to the From Wild West channel and give this video a like. Your support truly matters and motivates us to bring you more quality stories like this one. Where are you listening from today? The trader's eyes fixed on the ring with hunger that made Eliza's stomach turn. She'd escaped one predator in Missouri, her father's business partner who'd purchased her like livestock, only to find herself at the mercy of another. "That'll get you a week's room upstairs," the trader said, his smile revealing tobacco-stained teeth. Private-like. Eliza's hand closed around the ring. "Just water." "Ring's worth more than water, girl." "Then keep your water." She turned toward the door, her vision swimming with heat exhaustion. The desert stretched endlessly beyond the threshold, and she knew she wouldn't survive another mile. But she'd crawled through her bedroom window at midnight and stolen a horse to escape one cage. She wouldn't walk into another. The trading post door swung open before she reached it. The man who entered had to duck beneath the frame. Dust coated his work-worn shirt, and his hands bore the calluses of a life spent wrestling with the land. But it was his eyes, storm-gray and steady, that stopped Eliza mid-step. They swept over her once, taking in her torn dress and sun-blistered skin, then fixed on the trader with cold assessment. "She needs water, Jessup," the man said, his voice carrying the quiet authority of distant thunder. "Not whatever scheme you're cooking up. This ain't your concern, Dalton. Everything in this territory's my concern when it involves a woman collapsing on your doorstep." Dalton moved to the water barrel, filled a tin cup, and brought it to Eliza. His fingers brushed hers as he pressed it into her shaking hands. Slow, small sips. The water tasted like salvation. Eliza drained half the cup before her spinning world steadied enough to see him clearly. Tall, broad-shouldered, with sun-darkened skin and dark hair that curled at his collar. A fading scar traced his left jawline, and when he smiled, barely, just a softening around his eyes. She felt something crack in her chest. "Thank you," she managed. "I can pay. Keep your ring." He glanced at the gold band, still clutched in her fist. "Gold isn't what we need here. You are." The words hung in the dusty air between them. Eliza's breath caught. No one had ever said those words to her. Not her father, who'd sold her. Not her mother, who'd turned away. "You are." "I don't understand. My farm's 3 miles west. I've got hands who can work cattle, but nobody who can read or write. Nobody who can teach my foreman's children their letters. You look educated, and you look desperate. That's a combination I can work with." Jessup snorted. "You taking in strays now, Dalton?" Dalton didn't look away from Eliza. "I'm offering honest work for honest pay. Room, board, and wages. No strings, no expectations beyond what's fair. You can leave anytime you want." Eliza studied his face, searching for the lie, the hidden price. She'd learned to read men in her 23 years, their smiles that promised kindness before their hands turned cruel, their gentle words that masked brutal intent. But Dalton's eyes held something different. Steadiness. Truth. "Why?" she asked. because 3 months ago, I'd have given anything for someone to offer me the same choice when I needed it most. Something in his voice, old pain carefully controlled, made her decision. I can teach and cook if you need it. Then we have an agreement. He extended his hand, and after a moment, she shook it. His palm was warm, rough, and solid, real. The Dalton farm stretched across a valley where scrub grass fought for life between rocks and red earth. The house was simple, wooden frame, stone chimney, a porch that creaked, but clean. Dalton showed her to a small room with an actual bed, a wash basin, and a window overlooking the distant mountains. Water's in the barrel outside, kitchen's through there. Help yourself to whatever you need. He paused at the door. What's your name? Eliza Whitmore. James Dalton. Most folks call me Dalton. His eyes held hers for a moment too long, and she felt heat that had nothing to do with the Arizona sun. Get some rest. Tomorrow's soon enough to start. But sleep wouldn't come. Eliza lay on the first real bed she'd touched in weeks, listening to the night sounds of the desert, coyotes calling, wind whispering through canyon walls, the soft lowing of cattle in distant pens. Through her window, stars scattered across the sky like spilled diamonds. She thought of her father's house in Missouri, with its suffocating wallpaper and doors that locked from the outside. She thought of Richard Hartford, her would-be husband, who'd smiled at her father while discussing her like a broodmare. She thought of the moment she'd realized that marriage or death were her only choices, and how she'd chosen the uncertain promise of life instead. Now she was here, on a stranger's farm, with nothing but her mother's wedding ring and the clothes on her back. But the door to her room had no lock, and when she'd asked if she could leave any time, Dalton had said yes without hesitation. That was worth more than gold. Dawn broke pink and orange across the valley. Eliza woke to the smell of coffee and found Dalton already in the kitchen, frying bacon over a cast-iron stove. He glanced up when she entered, then nodded toward the table. Sit. Food first, then I'll show you around. They ate in companionable silence. The bacon was crispy, the eggs perfect, and Eliza realized this was the first meal in months she'd eaten without fear knotting her stomach. Dalton ate efficiently, his movements economical, like a man who'd learned not to waste motion. You don't have to explain what you're running from, he said finally, but I need to know if there's trouble following you. Eliza's fingers tightened on her fork. My father arranged my marriage to his business partner, Richard Hartford. He's 47, widowed twice, and she swallowed hard. He showed me what my wifely duties would entail. Before the wedding, Dalton's jaw tightened, the only sign of anger in his otherwise still expression. Did he hurt you? He tried. I fought. Then I ran. She met his eyes. If they come looking, it'll be because they want property returned, not a person rescued. Good. Good. Means I won't feel bad about what I do if they show up. Dalton pushed back from the table. You're not property, Eliza. You're a person, and on my land, that means something. The words settled into her bones like warmth. The farm's routine became her rhythm. Dalton's foreman, Miguel Reyes, had 3 children, Carlos, Sofia, and little Lucia, who arrived each morning for lessons. Eliza taught them to read using the few books Dalton owned, a Bible, a ranching manual, and a water-damaged copy of Shakespeare's sonnets that he claimed had belonged to his mother. You read Shakespeare, she said one evening, surprised. Dalton looked up from the harness he was mending. My mother was a schoolteacher in Boston. She taught me that a man could work with his hands and still feed his mind. He paused. She died when I was 12. Cholera. I'm sorry. Long time ago. But his hands had stilled on the leather, and Eliza recognized the shape of old grief. She returned to her book, but found herself watching him instead. The way lamplight caught in his dark hair, the concentration in his face as he worked, the strength in his hands that could gentle a skittish horse or mend a torn bridle with equal care. "What?" he asked, catching her staring. "Nothing," but her cheeks warmed. "Thank you for this." "For what?" "For seeing me as more than something to be used." Dalton set aside the harness and looked at her fully. "Eliza, any man who looks at you and sees property instead of the strongest woman I've met, that man's a fool." Her breath caught. "You don't know me. I know you walk through the desert alone rather than surrender to someone who'd cage you. I know you teach children with patience even when you're still healing from God knows what. I know you're brave." His voice dropped lower. "I see a woman worth saving, but you saved yourself before I ever met you." Eliza's hands trembled on her book. No one had ever spoken to her this way, like she was remarkable instead of burdensome, powerful instead of broken. "I should check the children's work," she managed, and fled to her room before he could see the tears. 2 weeks passed. The farm work was hard, but satisfying. Teaching in the mornings, helping with meals, learning to ride the gentle mare Dalton assigned her. He taught her to handle a rifle, standing behind her to adjust her grip, his breath warm against her ear as he murmured instructions about breathing and aim. "Squeeze, don't pull," he said, his hand covering hers on the trigger. "Feel the moment between heartbeats? Fire then." The rifle cracked. The tin can 50 yards away flew backward. "Perfect," Dalton said, and the pride in his voice made her chest swell. But there were moments when she'd catch him staring at the distant mountains with something bleak in his expression. Once, she found him at dawn, standing by a small grave marker she'd never noticed before. The name carved into the wood was weathered beyond reading. He didn't speak of it, and she didn't ask. They both carried ghosts. The trouble arrived on a Tuesday morning. Eliza was in the garden when she heard hoofbeats. 3 riders crested the ridge, and her blood turned to ice. Richard Hartford sat astride the lead horse, flanked by 2 hired guns. His face was red with rage and desert sun. "Eliza!" His voice cracked across the valley. "Get out here!" Dalton appeared from the barn, rifle in hand, but pointed at the ground. Miguel and the other ranch hands materialized from various corners of the property, armed and alert, but Hartford's men had their hands on their weapons, and Eliza knew how this would end. She stepped forward before anyone could stop her. "Richard, go home. You're coming back with me." Hartford dismounted, his bulk hitting the ground hard. "Your father paid good money. I'm not for sale. You're my property by contract. I'm nobody's property." Eliza's voice came out stronger than she felt. "I won't go with you." Hartford's hand shot out, grabbing her wrist. His fingers dug in hard enough to bruise. "You'll do what you're—" Dalton moved faster than seemed possible for a man his size. One moment he was 10 feet away. The next, his fist connected with Hartford's jaw with a crack that echoed off the canyon walls. Hartford went down like a felled tree. The 2 hired guns reached for their weapons. Dalton's rifle came up smooth as water, aimed at the nearest man's chest. "Don't." The word was soft, but absolute. "You boys are standing on my land, threatening a woman under my protection. You draw those guns, and you won't leave here breathing. Miguel and the ranch hands had their rifles trained on the intruders now. The hired gun's hands slowly moved away from their weapons. Hartford struggled to his feet, blood streaming from his split lip. "You're dead, farmer. I'll come back with the law." "No, you won't." Dalton's voice remained steady, conversational even, because Eliza's going to write a detailed account of what you did to her before she ran. Assault, attempted rape, false imprisonment. Then Miguel here is going to ride to Tucson and file it with the territorial marshal. He paused. "You want to press your claim? Fine. But I promise you, by the time this goes to court, everyone in Arizona territory will know exactly what kind of man you are. Your business partners, your church, your neighbors, everyone." Hartford's face went purple. "You can't prove—" "I can testify," Eliza said quietly, "and I will." For the first time since her father had told her about the engagement, she felt power in her own voice. Not just defiance, actual power. The power to choose, to speak, to stand. Hartford's eyes darted between Dalton's rifle and Eliza's unflinching stare. Whatever he saw there made him falter. "This isn't over." "Yes," Dalton said. "It is." The three riders mounted and left, dust trailing their retreat. Eliza didn't realize she was shaking until Dalton touched her shoulder. "You're safe," he said. "I promise you're safe. He could come back. Then we'll deal with it, together." That word, together, broke something open in her chest. Eliza turned into his arms before she could think better of it, and Dalton held her while she trembled. His heartbeat was steady against her ear. His arms were solid and warm. And for the first time since her mother died, Eliza let herself cry. That night, neither of them could sleep. Eliza found Dalton on the porch, staring at the stars. She sat beside him without speaking, and he passed her the cup of coffee he'd been holding. "My wife's name was Sarah," he said abruptly. "She died 8 months ago. Fever took her in 3 days." Eliza's throat tightened. "The grave by the creek." "Yeah." His voice was rough. "I promised her I'd never remarry. She made me swear it. Near the end. Said she couldn't bear the thought of another woman in her house, raising her children." He paused. "We didn't have children yet. She was afraid we never would. I'm sorry. I thought I could keep that promise. Thought I'd just work the land until I couldn't anymore, then sell it and move on." He turned to look at her, and his eyes were full of pain and something else, something bright and terrifying. "Then you stumbled into Jessup's trading post, and everything changed." Eliza's hands trembled on the coffee cup. "Dalton, I'm not asking anything of you," he said quickly. "I just need you to know, you're not a burden or a charity case. You're the reason I remember how to feel human again." The night air hung heavy between them. Eliza thought about his hands teaching her to shoot, his patience with the children, the way he'd stood between her and Richard Hartford, without hesitation. She thought about his smile, rare and devastating, and how his presence made her feel safe in a way she'd never known was possible. "I was engaged before," she said softly. "Not to Richard, to a boy from church, Thomas. He was kind, and I thought I loved him. Then my mother died, and my father's business nearly failed, and suddenly Thomas's family decided I wasn't a suitable match anymore. He didn't fight for me, just let me go. He was a fool. Maybe, but it taught me that love isn't enough if a man won't stand with you when things get hard." She met Dalton's eyes. You stood with me today, against armed men, for someone you've known 2 weeks. Felt longer, he said, and his smile was small but genuine. Eliza set down the coffee cup. I can't promise I'm not still broken. I can't promise I won't wake up screaming sometimes, or that I won't flinch when you move too fast. But her voice caught. I think I could love you, if you'd let me try. Dalton's hand came up to cup her cheek, gentle despite its calluses. Eliza, I'll go as slow as you need. Forever, if that's what it takes. Just stay. Please stay. Together, she whispered. Together. When he kissed her, it was soft and careful and full of promise. Eliza tasted coffee and hope, and for the first time in her life, she understood what safety felt like. 3 days later, Miguel burst into the house at dawn, his face pale. Dalton, the creek, there's children! They ran. By the time they reached the water, Eliza could see 3 small figures huddled. Eliza pushed past Dalton and crouched down, making herself small and non-threatening. Are you hungry? She asked gently. Thirsty? The girl's eyes flicked to her siblings. The youngest, a boy, was crying softly. Wait here, Eliza told Dalton, then ran back to the house. She returned with bread, dried meat, and a canteen of water. She set them on the ground and backed away, giving the children space. The girl watched her carefully, then slowly reached for the food. Within seconds, all 3 children were eating like they hadn't seen food in days. Where are your parents? Dalton asked softly. The girl's eyes filled with tears, but she lifted her chin. Dead. Soldiers. Eliza's heart broke. She'd heard stories of the conflicts, the Fort Grant massacre, the endless cycle of violence between settlers and Apaches. These children were survivors of something terrible. You're safe now, she said. I promise. The girl studied her face for a long moment. Then, slowly, she lowered the rock. They brought the children to the house. Maria, the oldest, explained haltingly that their village had been attacked by soldiers looking for a renegade warrior. Their parents had hidden them in a canyon, then led the soldiers away. They'd been walking for 4 days, trying to reach their relatives in the mountains. They won't make it alone, Miguel said quietly. It's 60 miles through hostile territory. And with the army hunting Apaches, we can't send them out there, Eliza said fiercely. Dalton rubbed his face. If anyone finds out we're harboring Apache children, we'll have trouble. Big trouble. Then we don't tell anyone. Eliza met his eyes. You said I'm not property, I'm a person. These children are people too. They deserve a chance. Something shifted in Dalton's expression. Pride, maybe, or respect. You're right. He turned to Maria. You and your brother and sister can stay here. As long as you need. You'll work, help with the animals, learn alongside the other children. But you'll be safe. I give you my word. Maria's fierce expression cracked. Why help us? Because someone once helped me when I needed it most. Dalton said, and because it's the right thing to do. The children stayed. Maria proved quick-witted and eager to learn. Her brother, Little Hawk, had gentle hands with the horses. The youngest, Avi, attached herself to Eliza with unwavering devotion. But 3 weeks later, trouble came. Eliza woke to the sound of hoofbeats. Not the casual rhythm of ranch horses. These were urgent, pounding. She threw on her robe and ran to the porch, where Dalton already stood with his rifle. A single rider approached, sitting astride a painted horse with the grace of someone born to the saddle. As the figure drew closer, Eliza realized it was a woman, tall, strong-featured, wearing buckskin and turquoise. Apache. The woman dismounted 20 feet from the porch. Her eyes scanned the property, and Eliza knew she was looking for the children. "I am Takata," the woman said in clear but accented English. "I come for my children." Maria appeared in the doorway, gasped, and ran. "Ina, mother!" Takata caught her daughter and held her tight, her face transforming with relief and joy. Little Hawk and Avi emerged next, and suddenly all three children were wrapped in their mother's arms, crying and laughing and speaking in rapid Apache. Eliza felt tears on her own cheeks. The woman had survived. Against all odds, she'd survived. When the reunion finally quieted, Takata stood and walked to Dalton. She was nearly as tall as him, her bearing proud and dignified. "My children tell me you saved them," she said. "Fed them, protected them, taught them." "We did what was right," Dalton said simply. "In the eyes of your people, hiding Apache children is not right. It is dangerous." Takata's eyes were sharp with intelligence. "Yet you did it anyway." "Ma'am, those are children. Nothing else matters." Takata studied him for a long moment. Then she turned to Eliza. "You taught Maria to read, to write her name. She says you treated her like a daughter." Eliza's throat tightened. "She's extraordinary. All of them are." "Yes, they are mine." Takata's expression softened slightly. "I owe you a debt that cannot be repaid with words." "You don't owe us anything," Dalton said. "Knowing they're safe with you is payment enough." But Takata shook her head. "In my people's tradition, a life debt must be honored. I have watched your farm from the hills for 3 days, learning who you are. You are honest people in a land of lies. You protect the weak when others would exploit them." She paused. "So I offer you an unthinkable reward." From her bag, she pulled out a rolled hide, which she spread on the porch. It was a map, detailed and intricate, showing water sources, game trails, and safe passages through the mountains. And marked with a distinctive symbol was a location in the high country. "There," Takata said, pointing. "The silver, the veins the Spanish searched for, the treasure my people have hidden for generations. It is yours." Dalton's eyes widened. "Ma'am, I can't." "You can. You will." Takata's voice was firm. "My children's lives are worth more than metal buried in stone. Take it. Build something good. And remember that not all debts are paid with gold. Some are paid with trust." She rolled up the map and pressed it into Dalton's hands. Then she gathered her children and mounted her horse, lifting little Avi to sit in front of her. "One more thing," Takata said, looking between Dalton and Eliza. "My daughter says you look at each other the way her father and I once did. Do not waste time in fear or doubt. Life is too short, and love is too rare." Then she wheeled her horse and rode back toward the mountains, her children safe in her arms. Dalton and Eliza stood on the porch in the dawn light, watching until Takata and the children disappeared over the ridge. The map felt heavy in Dalton's hands, not with the weight of paper and ink, but with possibility. "That just happened," Eliza said finally. "Yeah. She gave us a silver mine, apparently. An unthinkable reward." Dalton turned to look at her, and his smile was crooked. "Not unthinkable, not for you." Eliza's breath caught. "What?" "You heard her. Life debt, trust, love." He set the map down carefully and took Eliza's hands in his. "I know it's been less than 2 months. I know you're still healing. But Eliza, I don't want to waste any more time pretending I don't love you." "Dalton," You make me want to be better than I am. You make me believe in second chances." His thumb stroked over her knuckles. "I'm not asking you to forget your past or erase your scars. I'm asking you to build a future with me, together." Eliza felt tears spill over. "I'm still afraid sometimes. I still wake up thinking I'm back in that house. Then I'll be there to remind you where you really are, every morning, forever, if you'll let me." "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll let you. Yes to everything." When he kissed her this time, it was deeper, fuller, with the promise of tomorrows stretching endlessly ahead. Eliza wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him back with all the fierce love she'd been holding inside. They married 3 weeks later. Miguel's wife sewed Eliza a simple dress from cream-colored cotton, and Maria's sisters, who'd arrived with Takata to visit, wove wildflowers into her hair. Dalton wore his best shirt and boots, and when the circuit preacher pronounced them husband and wife, his eyes were bright. "Together," he whispered. "Together," she agreed. The kiss they shared tasted like coming home. That evening, as the sun set over their valley, Dalton showed Eliza the survey of the silver mine. The deposits were real, more extensive than either had imagined. They could expand the farm, build schools, help more people escaping desperate circumstances. "What do you want to do with it?" he asked. Eliza thought of Maria and her siblings, of herself stumbling into a trading post with nothing but a wedding ring, of all the women and children who needed someone to see them as people instead of property. "I want to build something good," she said. "Something that helps people like us, people who need a second chance." Dalton pulled her close. "Then that's what we'll do." Years later, when people asked about the Dalton Ranch and how it became a refuge for those in need, Eliza would tell them about the 3 Apache children she'd found by the creek, about their mother, who rode out of the dawn with an unthinkable reward, about the farmer who'd saved them all without expecting anything in return. But mostly she'd tell them about love, hard-won, fiercely protected, and built on the simple truth that every person deserves to be seen, valued, and free, and that some debts are paid not with gold, but with trust. Epilogue. 5 years later, the Dalton Ranch sprawled across the valley, prosperous and peaceful. The silver mine funded schools, wells, and a network of safe houses for those fleeing violence or oppression. Eliza taught 30 children now, Apache, Mexican, white, and mixed, all learning side by side. She stood on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold, her hand resting on her swollen belly. Their first child would arrive before winter. Dalton came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Tired? Happy," she corrected, leaning back against his chest. In the distance, Maria rode past on her spotted pony, leading a group of younger children toward the barn. She'd grown tall and strong, and stayed at the ranch to help teach the others. Little Hawk worked with the horses, and Avi, now a bright-eyed 9-year-old, had declared she'd be a doctor someday. "Think about where we started," Dalton murmured. "You with nothing but a ring, me with nothing but grief. And now we have everything." He turned her gently to face him. "Thank you." "For what?" "For stumbling into that trading post. For being brave enough to take a chance on a broken-down farmer. For building this with me." Eliza reached up to cup his face, running her thumb along the scar on his jaw. "Gold isn't what we needed," she said softly, echoing his words from so long ago. "We just needed each other. And look what we built with that." They kissed as the sun sank below the horizon, painting their valley in shades of promise and hope. Behind them, the house blazed with lamplight and the sound of children laughing. Before them, The future stretched wide and welcoming. Together they'd found home. Together they'd found love. Together they'd found freedom. And that was worth more than all the silver buried in the mountains. The winter wind howled through the canyon walls, carrying snow that stung like needles. Eliza pressed closer to the fireplace, one hand on her belly where their daughter kicked restlessly. 7 months pregnant, and the storm had trapped them inside for 3 days. "Getting worse," Dalton said, returning from checking the livestock. Ice crusted his beard and coat. Lost visibility past the barn. Miguel appeared in the doorway, his expression grim. "Boss, we've got a problem. Found tracks in the north pasture before the storm hit. Boot prints, 6 men at least, circling the property." Eliza's blood went cold. Richard? Could be, or could be someone who heard about the silver. Dalton stripped off his frozen coat, his jaw tight. "Either way, we need to be ready." The storm kept them prisoner for 2 more days. On the 3rd morning, Eliza woke to silence, the terrible, heavy silence that follows a blizzard. She found Dalton already up, standing at the window with his rifle. "They're out there," he said quietly. "I can feel it." He was right. By noon, 6 riders emerged from the white landscape like ghosts materializing from mist. Eliza's heart sank when she recognized the lead rider, Richard Hartford, thinner and meaner looking than before, flanked by hired guns who looked like they'd kill for pocket change. "Dalton," Richard's voice carried across the snow, "send out my property and we'll leave peaceful-like." Dalton stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand. Eliza followed, despite his warning look, her hand resting on the small pistol hidden in her skirt pocket. "She's not your property," Dalton called back. "She's my wife, legal and binding. Now get off my land." "Your land?" Richard laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the canyon walls. "See, I did some digging. Found out about your little Apache friends, about the children you harbored, about the silver mine that mysteriously appeared in your possession." He leaned forward in his saddle. "Folks in Tucson are real interested in a farmer who consorts with savages and steals their treasure." "That's a lie," Eliza said, stepping forward. "Takata gave us." "Gave?" Richard sneered. "Or did you take it at gunpoint? Who's gonna believe an Apache woman's word against mine, especially when I've got witness statements from concerned citizens?" "Who saw you with those children?" Dalton's knuckles went white on his rifle. "What do you want?" "Simple. Sign over the mine. Give me Eliza. I'm owed a wife after all, and I won't report your Apache-loving activities to the Army." Richard smiled. "Or I ride to Fort Bowie tonight, and by morning soldiers will be here to arrest you for theft and harboring enemy combatants." "He's bluffing," Miguel muttered from inside the doorway. But Eliza knew Richard wasn't. He'd always been vindictive, always willing to burn the world down if he couldn't have what he wanted. "I'll go with him," she said quietly. "Like hell you will." Dalton's voice was steel. "If I don't, he'll destroy everything we've built, the ranch, the schools, the children we help. We'll find another way. There is no other way." Eliza grabbed his arm, desperate. "James, please, I won't let him destroy you. I won't let him hurt everyone who depends on us. I can survive him. I did it before." "No." Dalton turned to face her fully, his eyes blazing. "You listen to me, Eliza Dalton. I will die before I let that man take you. Do you understand? I will burn this ranch to the ground myself before I hand you over like livestock. But the children will understand that some things are more important than land or silver." He cupped her face in his rough hands. "You taught me that. You showed me that people matter more than property. I'm not giving you up. Not now, not ever." Tears froze on Eliza's cheeks. "Then what do we do?" A new voice cut through the tension. "You stand together and you trust." Takata emerged from the tree line, mounted on her painted horse, flanked by 20 Apache warriors armed with rifles and bows. Maria rode beside her mother, her young face set with determination. Richard's hired guns reached for their weapons, but froze when they saw the number of rifles trained on them. "You," Takata said, her voice carrying absolute authority as she stared at Richard. "You are the man who tried to cage this woman like an animal. This is none of your concern, squaw." One of the warriors raised his rifle, and Richard fell silent. "Everything concerning this family is my concern," Takata continued. "They saved my children when they could have turned them away. They risked everything to protect the helpless. They are under my protection now." She smiled, and it was not kind. "You speak of reporting them? Go ahead. But know that if you do, my warriors will visit your home, your business, everyone you care about. And they will explain, very carefully, what happens to men who threaten those under Apache protection. You're threatening me? I am making a promise." Takata's eyes were cold as the snow around them. "Leave now, never return, and pray we do not hear your name again." Richard's face went purple with rage, but his hired guns were already backing their horses away. They weren't stupid enough to fight 20 Apache warriors on hostile terrain. "This isn't over," Richard spat. "Yes," Eliza said, stepping forward with her hand still on her hidden pistol. "It is, because if you ever come near me or my family again, I won't need Apache warriors to protect me. I'll shoot you myself." The certainty in her voice made Richard flinch. He'd only known the frightened girl in Missouri. He'd never met the woman she'd become. With a curse, he wheeled his horse and fled, his men following in a spray of snow. Silence fell over the valley. Then Dalton started laughing. Deep, genuine laughter that shook his whole body. "Did you see his face? I thought he might fall off his horse," Miguel chuckled. Takata dismounted and walked to the porch. "Maria wanted to visit. I told her we would check on you first." Her eyes twinkled. "I am glad we did." "Thank you," Eliza said, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know how to." "You already have. You honor our gift. You help those who need help. You raise your child to know justice." Takata placed a hand on Eliza's belly. "This daughter will be strong like her mother, fierce like her father. And she will know that true family is not bound by blood, but by choice." Spring came late that year, but when it arrived, it transformed the valley into a carpet of wildflowers. Eliza gave birth on a warm April morning, with Takata serving as midwife, and Dalton pacing holes in the floor outside. When he finally held his daughter, tiny and perfect, with dark hair and her mother's eyes, he wept. "Sarah," Eliza whispered, naming her after Dalton's first wife. Sarah Takata Dalton. Dalton looked at her in surprise. "Are you sure?" "She deserves to be remembered, and our daughter deserves to know that love can exist alongside grief, that new joy doesn't erase old pain." Eliza touched the baby's soft cheek. "We carry our ghosts with us. That's how we honor them." That night, as their daughter slept between them, Dalton pulled Eliza close. "I was so afraid," he admitted, "when Richard came, when I thought I might lose you. But you didn't. We stood together, remember? Together." He kissed her forehead. "Always together." Little Sarah was 6 months old when the stranger arrived. He rode a fine black horse and wore a suit too expensive for the frontier. but his eyes were kind beneath his bowler hat. "James Dalton?" he asked, dismounting at the porch. "That's me. My name is Benjamin Whitmore." The man removed his hat, revealing silver-threaded hair. "I'm Eliza's uncle, her father's brother." Eliza appeared in the doorway, Sarah on her hip, and froze. "Uncle Benjamin?" "Hello, Eliza." His voice cracked. "I've been searching for you for over a year." The story tumbled out over coffee and cornbread. Benjamin had been traveling in Europe when Eliza's father had arranged her marriage to Richard. When he'd returned and learned what happened, how Eliza had fled, how her father had essentially sold her, he'd been horrified. "I confronted my brother," Benjamin said, his hands shaking on his cup. "He told me you were hysterical, ungrateful, that Richard would tame you. I knew then that my brother was lost to greed and cruelty. I hired investigators to find you." "Why?" Eliza asked, suspicion still sharp despite his apparent sincerity. "Because I failed you. I should have been there. I should have stopped it." Benjamin's eyes filled with tears. "Your mother was my favorite sister-in-law. She made me promise, before she died, that I'd watch over you. I broke that promise." Dalton's hand found Eliza's under the table, squeezing gently. "What do you want, Mr. Whitmore?" he asked carefully. "To make amends." Benjamin pulled out a thick envelope. "This is your inheritance, Eliza. Your mother's portion of her family's estate. Your father tried to absorb it into his accounts, but it was held in trust. It's substantial, enough to expand your ranch, build real schools, help hundreds of people." Eliza stared at the envelope like it might bite her. "And the cost?" "No cost, no strings." Benjamin met her eyes. "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect a relationship. I just want you to have what's rightfully yours, what your mother wanted you to have." For a long moment, Eliza said nothing. Then she picked up Sarah and walked to stand beside her uncle. "This is Sarah Takata Dalton, your great-niece. If you want to be part of her life, part of our lives, you have to understand something. Anything. We don't do things the way your brother did. We don't own people or control them or cage them. We build families based on choice and respect and love." She shifted Sarah to her other hip. "Can you live with that?" Benjamin's face transformed with hope. "I would be honored." The Dalton Ranch flourished. With the inheritance and the silver mine, they built a proper school, a clinic, and a network of safe houses stretching from Tucson to the border. Benjamin moved into a small house on the property and proved invaluable, using his business connections to establish trade routes and defend their land from hostile claims. Maria grew into a beautiful young woman who spoke 4 languages and ran the school with fierce intelligence. Little Hawk became the best horse trainer in the territory. Avi, true to her childhood declaration, went east to study medicine. And through it all, Eliza and Dalton built a life that defied every expectation placed on them. One evening, when Sarah was 3 and Eliza was pregnant with their second child, they stood on the porch watching the sunset. The valley spread before them, golden and peaceful, dotted with the homes of the families they'd helped. "Think about where we started," Dalton said, echoing words from years before. "I think about it every day," Eliza replied, leaning into his warmth. "That desperate girl in the trading post, that grieving farmer who offered her hope instead of exploitation. Best decision I ever made. Offering me a job, seeing you." He turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her belly. "Really seeing you, not as property or a problem, but as a person worth fighting for." Eliza touched his face, tracing the scar she'd come to love. "You taught me I was worth fighting for." That changed everything. Their kiss was soft and sweet, flavored with the promise of tomorrow and all the tomorrows after that. Sarah ran out onto the porch, squealing with laughter, chased by Benjamin, who was Dalton swept his daughter up into his arms, roaring playfully while she shrieked with delight. Eliza watched them, her heart so full it ached. This was freedom, not the absence of constraints, but the presence of choice. The ability to build something good from broken pieces. The strength to stand together against any storm. Together? Dalton asked, as he had so many times before. Together, Eliza confirmed, as she always would. Always together. Years later, when people told the story of the Dalton Ranch, they spoke of the farmer who saw a desperate woman and offered her dignity instead of exploitation. They spoke of the Apache mother who rewarded kindness with trust and treasure. They spoke of the children who found safety and the families who found hope. But mostly, they spoke of love, fierce and hard-won, built on respect and choice and the simple truth that every person deserves to be seen, valued, and free. And in a valley where wildflowers bloomed every spring, where children of all backgrounds learned side by side, where broken people came to be made whole, that love flourished and grew, season after season, generation after generation. Because some things are worth more than gold or silver. Some things are worth everything. And the Dalton family had found them all. Love, freedom, family, and home, together. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're enjoying this tale from. Are you listening at home, during your commute, or perhaps while working? Please subscribe to the From Wild West channel and share your thoughts in the comments below. What did you think of James and Eliza's journey and of Takata's incredible act of honor? Your feedback means the world to us.